The majority of people think that regular health examinations are always beneficial. After all, you can save your life if you catch something early. However, what if I told you that some of these routine screenings may not only be pointless after a certain age, particularly after 70, but may even put you in danger? It sounds backwards, I know. We are taught to keep on top of our health from an early age, to test, to scan, to screen, just in case. However, there is a reality that more and more medical professionals are beginning to acknowledge. As we age, we must be more cautious about what we find rather than what we miss. As it turns out, some of the most common health tests available to older adults, tests that seem perfectly reasonable, can result in false alarms, dangerous procedures, and a great deal of stress and money spent on issues that may never have been harmful in the first place. Ignoring your health is not the point here. It needs to be protected. It's about realizing that medicine is evolving and that what worked for you in your 50s might not work for you in your 70s. For this reason, we will examine 5 common checkups that seniors should reconsider in this video in an open and caring manner. Tests that, despite their best efforts, may end up causing more harm than good. We'll go over each one in detail. I'll describe them, discuss why they're still so strongly advised, and discuss how taking more careful care might actually mean doing less rather than more. Additionally, I believe this will be very beneficial to you if you value your time, energy, and independence. Let's get started. Remember to click the like button, subscribe, and share this with a loved one if you're new here. It could save them a great deal of trouble. Let's begin with the colonoscopy, one of the most well-known and dependable examinations available. This test has been the gold standard for early detection of colon cancer for decades. And with good reason. A colonoscopy can save your life if you're in your 50s or early 60s. It can detect polyps, which are microscopic growths, before they become serious. However, the situation shifts as we age, particularly after the age of 70. What used to be beneficial can subtly turn harmful. Here's why. A colonoscopy is a serious procedure. It calls for a full bowel prep, in which you clear your intestines by consuming potent laxatives. Dehydration and electrolyte imbalances, which are much more dangerous in older adults, can result from that alone. The sedative comes next. The drug used to put you under doesn't leave an older person's body the same way it does a younger one. It persists. As you are aware, it can result in disorientation, drowsiness, and even falls, which can cause broken bones or prolonged hospital stays. What occurs after the test, however, is arguably the most neglected problem. A colonoscopy may reveal a small polyp, which is a slow-growing growth that may never develop into cancer, even if you are symptom-free and feel fine. But as soon as it's noticed, fear takes over. You are informed that you require a follow-up examination, a biopsy, and possibly surgery. All of a sudden, you find yourself entangled in a series of medical procedures that you never requested and that might not have been required in the first place. I remember my neighbor George, who loved working in his garden and was as sharp as a tack at 82. His doctor suggested a routine colonoscopy, even though he had no stomach problems. He became very dehydrated during the preparation. He was drowsy after the procedure, fell that night at home, and broke his hip. Months of rehabilitation and medical expenses resulted from that one test. What's the worst? Nothing was discovered during the colonoscopy. Nothing. Why all that suffering? Please understand that this is not about placing blame on medical professionals. They are acting in accordance with their training. However, medicine is beginning to change, and we must change with it. Many leading geriatric specialists now advise against it if you are over 70 and do not have any digestive symptoms, particularly if you have previously had a clean colonoscopy. Simple, safe, and effective non-invasive stool tests are now available. No sedative, no dehydration. simply a sample at home and mental calm without the strain. Refusing a colonoscopy after the age of 70 does not mean that you are neglecting your health. You're taking care of your health by being aware of the risks, assessing the advantages, and making the best decision for your stage of life. Because quality care eventually results in more deliberate decisions and fewer interventions. The thought of a full body scan is very alluring. Imagine a device that could examine every part of you, from head to toe, and identify any hidden problems before they become serious. Doesn't that sound like the most intelligent kind of prevention? However, most people are unaware of this fact. Full body scans frequently cause far more problems than they save after the age of 70. These aren't your average X-rays. We're discussing sophisticated imaging techniques like MRIs and CT scans. Indeed, they are adept at finding things, almost too adept, because they frequently discover what medical professionals refer to as incidentalomas, tiny anomalies that appear suspicious but are entirely harmless. A tiny lesion on your kidney, a harmless cyst, or a tiny shadow on your lung. Things that might never shorten your life, never cause symptoms, and never have an impact on your health. But after they appear on a scan, panic strikes. There are more tests after that. Biopsies follow. Next, operations. All of them are pursuing something that may not have required pursuing in the first place. Betty and I first met at a senior wellness workshop a few years ago. She was 78 years old, had a big smile, went for daily walks, and had never smoked. A mobile clinic gave her a free, full body scan at a health fair. She said yes, just to be sure. On her kidney, they discovered a small lesion. No signs. The word lesion, however, rocked her to her very core. She was having surgery in a matter of weeks. She was still recuperating months later, weak, exhausted, and battling complications. She lost the energy she used to have with her grandchildren after that one scan. And you know what? It was determined that the lesion was not cancerous. It's known as overdiagnosis in medicine. It's known as needless fear on an emotional level. And in terms of money? Since insurance typically does not cover these scans, many seniors wind up paying cash out of pocket in the hopes of gaining peace of mind. In reality, though, they are purchasing a one-way pass to a series of unnecessary follow-up tests. Finding every shadow isn't always the best way to get healthcare at this point in life. It comes from paying attention to your body, your gut, and your daily emotions. Are you still with me? Please leave a comment with a 2 below if this section spoke to you so I know you're here. Now is the perfect moment to click the button and turn on the bell if you haven't already, so you don't miss any upcoming videos that are tailored just for you. Let's discuss the cardiac stress test, another examination that seems sensible at first glance. It's the one where you walk on a treadmill while wired up so that doctors can see how your heart responds to stress. You've probably heard of it. It makes sense, doesn't it? Particularly if you want to ensure that your heart is strong and you are over 70. This is where things get complicated, though. This test may do more harm than good if you don't have any heart symptoms, such as chest pain, shortness of breath, or unusual fatigue. You see, our bodies naturally change with age. Our arteries become somewhat rigid. We may have slightly different heart rhythms. These are simply indications of normal aging, not of illness. However, stress tests aren't very good at identifying the differences. Red flags are raised when they notice a dip or a blip. The dominoes begin to fall at that point. Consider my 74-year-old friend George. No pain in the chest, no problems. Went in for a standard examination just now. Let's be safe and do a stress test, his doctor advised, and the results were borderline, nothing spectacular. However, it was sufficient to send him to a cardiologist. He was lying on a hospital bed 3 weeks later, having a stent installed for a minor blockage that had not resulted in any issues. Complications resulted from that stent. He ended up in the intensive care unit after experiencing a medication reaction and contracting an infection at the site of insertion. Months passed while he recovered. The problem is that, prior to everything, he felt fine. Unbeknownst to most, this type of chain reaction occurs frequently, and it has nothing to do with doctors being irresponsible. It's because we've all been taught to be so afraid of heart disease that we react to any hint that it may be present. In actuality, though, the stress test may not be required at all if you are symptom-free. Instead, concentrate on the things that really help your heart. Regular walks, healthy eating, spending time with loved ones, and reducing stress. After 70, those are the things that really count. We don't have to pursue every potential issue. We must safeguard what we currently possess. Let's take a quick look back at the colonoscopy from a new perspective. Well, I've already had a colonoscopy or two, and everything came back normal, you may be thinking. To be safe, shouldn't I just continue to do them every few years? That's what many elderly people think. Additionally, some physicians continue to support it. However, very few people are aware of this. Getting another colonoscopy in your mid to late 70s, or later, may not only be unnecessary, but it may also be risky if you have had a clean colonoscopy in the past and you do not currently have any symptoms. Let's discuss the actual steps involved in the process. The first step is bowel prep, which is a difficult undertaking if you have experienced it. Strong laxatives, long periods of time spent close to the restroom, and a body that may feel exhausted by the end. It is uncomfortable for younger adults. However, it can cause severe kidney dysfunction, dehydration, and falls in older adults. The sedative follows. Your liver and brain process medications differently at this age. An older person may experience brain fog, confusion, or even long-term memory problems as a result of a sedative that wears off in a 50-year-old. Post-operative cognitive dysfunction is a real and common condition. I will always remember Eileen's story. She was 78 years old, a retired teacher, and had already had 2 successful colonoscopies at ages 68 and 73. However, just to be safe, her doctor advised one last check at age 78. Thinking she was doing the right thing, she nodded. However, something went wrong during the procedure. Her colon developed a perforation, which is a tiny tear. Then came emergency surgery. She never fully recovered her strength after spending a month in the hospital. What about the test? Nothing was discovered. Not a single polyp of concern. Time is important because of this. The purpose of colonoscopies is to detect polyps that may not become serious for 10 to 15 years. However, the likelihood that a polyp would become dangerous in your remaining years is extremely low if you are already in your late 70s or early 80s and have had clear results in the past. However, the likelihood of complications only increases. Therefore, it's perfectly acceptable to state, "I think I'm done with that test," if you've had positive screening results and feel fine. Heart disease may seem like a silent danger. You hear the tales of people who appear to be in perfect health and then unexpectedly suffer a heart attack. Therefore, it is only natural for us to check, double-check, and occasionally overcheck. However, similar to stress tests, a lot of heart-related procedures that are available to seniors nowadays are performed without causing any symptoms, and that's where the problems start. This is what frequently occurs. A cardiologist is consulted after a routine stress test or a small EKG irregularity. The cardiologist may then prescribe a more sophisticated procedure, such as a cardiac catheterization, in which a thin tube is inserted into your arteries to check for blockages. Doesn't that sound useful? The problem is that these blockages are frequently mild, age-appropriate, and symptomless in adults over 70. However, after they are identified, Medical professionals might feel under pressure to fix them by suggesting a procedure or implanting a stent as a precaution. Harold, a 76-year-old grandfather from Illinois, experienced precisely that. He loved gardening, played tag with his grandchildren, was active, and showed no symptoms of heart problems. However, his doctor suggested a quick test to be safe during a yearly checkup, which resulted in a cardiac catheterization. A tiny, non-blocking plaque was discovered by the cath. Still, they implanted a stent. Harold had to take strong blood thinners after that. He had a severe internal hemorrhage within 2 weeks, was admitted to the hospital, and recuperated for 3 months. The worst thing? Perhaps that stent wasn't even necessary. You see, a number of leading cardiologists now concur that stents and catheterizations do not prevent heart attacks in asymptomatic individuals. They don't prolong life. Furthermore, the risks, such as kidney damage, bleeding, and stroke, may exceed any advantages for elderly people. The superior route? Be mindful of your feelings. When you walk, do you get out of breath? Do you experience unusual fatigue or pressure in your chest? Yes, then it's time to look into it. However, your body is already communicating with you more clearly than any machine could if you're content, sleeping soundly, and leading a fulfilling life. It is not necessary to pursue every illness at this point in life. It's about safeguarding your vitality, mental stability, and capacity for full life. I want to express my gratitude to anyone who has supported me during this entire journey. Because we have discussed more than just examinations and tests today. It has to do with something deeper, something much more intimate. It's about realizing that aging does not imply a decline in health. It actually means managing it more wisely than ever before. It entails posing pertinent questions, having faith in your experience, and resisting the urge to follow a medical system that occasionally loses sight of what is most important. The world in which we live exalts more. More tests, more operations, more medications. But after 70, saying, "Wait," is the most courageous thing you can do. Is this test truly for me? You've realized what really counts: your comfort, your clarity, and your capacity to savor the years you've worked so hard for, not because you're afraid. All of this does not imply that you should disregard symptoms or forego treatment when it is required. On the contrary, it does, however, imply that not all tests are gifts. Some invite anxiety, bewilderment, and needless medical intervention. Your body is a life to be respected, not a riddle to be solved. Thus, consult your physician. Inquire, will this test alter my feelings or my way of life? Is this a matter of habit or my health? Advocate for yourself. That is a right you have earned. I'd also love to know if this video gave you a fresh perspective on your health. Tell us about one realization that has stayed with you in the comments section below. What are you going to do differently in the future? Please like, subscribe, and forward this to a loved one if you found it useful. Your assistance is greatly appreciated and enables us to continue producing intelligent, senior-focused content. You should receive care that meets your needs, not just those on the checklist. Additionally, knowing when to say no can sometimes be the healthiest course of action.